As we record this, we're getting excited for Nvidia earnings later this week, but in just a couple weeks' time, it'll be old news, and Micron will be reporting their earnings. And right now, what everybody is talking about is memory.
The memory trade. If you missed it, we did a deep dive on the memory market back in mid-January. We talked about the memory hierarchy and this infographic here. As it pertains to our discussion today, we're going to be primarily talking about the middle section, DRAM, and specifically high bandwidth memory, or HBM.
HBM is a type of DRAM package close to the GPU. On the left side of this infographic, you can see the GPU die, and that memory is co-packaged right next to the processing unit.
In this AI data center era, and especially as AI inference becomes all the talk of the town, big disruption happening, or at least we're led to believe happening in the established software market, HBM is an important ingredient in that mix. And Micron is, of course, one of three companies that make up basically the HBM market. Some companies like CXMT working on some older generations of HBM for their own domestic market there in China, but for the rest of the world, it's mostly just these three companies right here. And in HBM, Micron ramping up its production pretty aggressively. There was briefly this rumor earlier in February that Micron was not going to be included in Nvidia's supply chain for the upcoming launch of Vera Rubin. CFO Mark Murphy nipped that in the bud earlier this month. So that all begs the question, where are we at right now with Micron's valuation? The growth is most definitely going to be there in calendar year 2026. It appears the growth is going to be there in 2027. So what are we looking at for valuation? Is it too late to try to jump aboard the Micron and the greater AI data center memory trade?
With this massive expansion in AI data centers and the memory market in general, Micron is having to spend a lot of money to keep up, to expand their capacity for these memory chips. This is a cyclical business. Historically, it's been very cyclical. And here at Chipstock Investor, I know many don't agree with us, but memory is one component of an entire system, and therefore it is a commodity in our minds. One of the key metrics we need to look at in a business like this, especially when it is so cyclical, is their free cash flow. How do you calculate free cash flow? This chart right here helps you out. Cash from operating activities minus capital expenditures gives you free cash flow.
And the blue bars there, especially the last two on the right, are analyst expectations for cash from operations for the current fiscal year that ends in August 2026. And then the last one is for fiscal 2027, which ends in about a year and a half, August 2027. So the general expectation here is, obviously, no surprise, massive growth for Micron as their capacity that they currently have up and running is completely sold out for this year. It seems the early indication is they're probably going to sell out that capacity for 2027 as well. And so whenever you have demand exceeding supply, you have a situation where not only is the company humming along nicely, earning lots of revenue, but prices actually go up. And when the company passes on price increases to their customers, the hyperscalers, data center operators, you get a big increase in profitability. And that's why you're seeing those big expected spikes in cash from operating activities over the next 2 years. However, as Casey just said, because this is a manufacturer, one that manufactures basic part, ingredient needed in data centers, we need to factor for the CapEx, the capital expenditures on new plants, or in this case, specifically for Micron, new fabs, chip fabs, and equipment to fill up those fabs. To meet that customer demand, Micron is going to be ramping up that CapEx pretty aggressively starting this year.
Yes, in fiscal year 2026, they expect it to be around 20 billion. Their prior estimate was around 18 billion, so they added a couple bill. And with those capital expenditures, Micron is accelerating the timeline for a lot of their fab developments. The third bullet point there, Micron is expecting their new Idaho fab to have their first wafer output in mid-calendar 2027. They've announced plans for a second Idaho fab, which is going to begin construction in 2026 and then hopefully operational by 2028. They're also making progress on the New York site, and they ended up breaking ground on that here just this year.
It's not just investment happening in the US either. They also had announced expansion in Japan. There's that high bandwidth memory packaging facility in Singapore that is also an assembly and test facility in India. And subsequent to the last earnings announcement in December, Micron had also announced the acquisition of that fab from PowerChip in Taiwan. We had a write-up on this last month over on Semi Insider. Make sure you check that out. You can get access to it over at chipstockinvestor.com. So if you add it all up, Micron has said that they're going to be spending something to the tune of $150 billion in capital expenditures over time across all of these different projects. Let's say that's going to be through 2030, over the next 5 years. So 150 billion divided by 5 gets you to about 30 billion in CapEx per year. And so that's actually our assumption. If we go back to calculating free cash flow, Micron already said for the balance of this current fiscal year that ends in August, 20 billion in CapEx is the expectation. Great. But as they ramp up these other projects, the additional fab in Idaho, New York, the new acquisition that was just made, our baseline assumption is that CapEx is actually going to rise to 30 billion for fiscal 2027, the period that will end in August of next year. And as a result of that, you can see the potential risk if this growth cycle doesn't indeed continue as presently expected over the course of the next year and a half. Big increases expected in cash from operating activities. Yes, that's fantastic, but big increases also expected in CapEx. So ultimately, there's two ways to look at this. One is Micron is actually in fantastic shape to be able to pay for these additional investments in its manufacturing output. But on the other hand, all of that is dependent on the growth cycle continuing. So summing it all up, what do we think free cash flow is over the course of the next year and a half? And what does that mean for Micron's valuation?
Our expectation is fiscal 2026, which is going to end in August. Micron will have free cash flow of 20 billion. And then in fiscal 2027, free cash flow of 25 billion. So with the current stock price at Micron of around $420 to $430, that puts the current trading activity at 24x for the current year and 20x for fiscal year 2027 free cash flow.
That is just our estimate, and it is an early estimate. We have no doubt a lot will change. It could change for the better, or it could eventually change for the worse. But as it stands right now, here in calendar year 2026, the memory trade still looks to be going strong. So we'll continue monitoring it. And in the meantime, Nvidia earnings.
If you're anxious to hear a little bit about Nvidia before the earnings, check out this video that we did on Nvidia and their high voltage data center partners right here.